Thank you, John. I'm here today with Anne to talk to you about the launch of our new framework, a Dendrochronology research framework for Scotland. Oh, I got the clicker. Okay, so hopefully most of you here have heard of ScARF before. I was here last year for those of you who are here talking about another project. The original ScARF, Scottish Archaeological Research Framework, is now 12 years old. It's a project that is run by the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland, who I work for. And it's a national framework, which is quite unusual at the time, which looked at what we knew about the archaeology of Scotland, and also importantly, what we want to know in future, both in terms of research questions, but also research agenda in terms of the sort of things we could be doing to increase our knowledge of archaeology in Scotland. It was also quite unique in that it was available online as an online research framework, and you can still find us at www.scarf.scot. So it provides a summary back then of the archaeology of Scotland across all time, across all the chronological periods. So most of our frameworks are arranged with chronological chapters. But we also had two original thematic research frameworks, one on marine and maritime and one on archaeological science. Since 2012, we've created a few new thematic research frameworks. For example, future thinking on carved stones in Scotland, and the Antonine Wall World Heritage Site research framework as well. We've mainly over the past sort of 5-6 years been concentrating on our regional research framework projects, which aim to gradually update the national picture with a series of more nuanced regional frameworks. So we have a bit more of a nuanced and updated perspective on the archaeology of Scotland. And like I said, last year, I was here talking to you about the South East Scotland Archaeological Research Framework, which we're hoping to complete in 2025. So as part of the process of creating these regional research frameworks, we discussed a lot about archaeological science and how it fitted into the regional projects. It became very clear there was a need to review the archaeological science research framework. It's probably the most out of date, or seems to have gone out of date most quickly out of all of our original frameworks. As you can imagine, in 12 years, the advance of knowledge, knowledge and techniques, and how we can use science and archaeology has increased exponentially. So many new techniques can now be used, and developments. And as well as the science side, there's also the ethical approaches as well. Ethical considerations on how we use science in archaeology. For example, our section on DNA in the original 2012 science framework is like a couple of paragraphs. So it's clear the archaeological science framework needs an update. The original chapters were in the science framework were chronology, human and animal sciences, understanding materials, people and environment, detecting and imaging, and statistical modelling. And throughout our regional research framework projects, there was a lot of discussion as to how we would incorporate and update these science chapters. We had many scientists involved in our regional research frameworks, and we have quite a few where we've highlighted research questions in specific areas where science can help us answer. And we also have a few science case studies. But the feedback was very much that we needed to look at having a full review, really, and update of the archaeological science part of our research framework. So a few years ago, we set up a number of groups to discuss each of the different sections. So essentially a group for each of those different sections. Again, this sort of happened around COVID. So we started talking about this, but we weren't able to progress as much as we'd like to at the time. But as part of the chronology discussions, we started to focus on dendrochronology, specifically as it was a topic that came up time and time again in our regional research frameworks. Coralie Mills and Anne and others had already contributed to sections in our regional research frameworks where we saw the potential of bringing all this knowledge together as our first project to update part of the scientific research framework. So Anne is going to talk to you about the detail of the framework, but I just wanted to emphasise how much of a collaborative effort the development of this framework has been. We are at ScARF and at the Society are particularly grateful for all the work that's been done by Anne Crone, Coralie Mills, Neil Loader from Swansea University, Tom Overden from Forest Research, and Rob Wilson from the University of St Andrews to write the chapters. We originally had an in-person day workshop to plan out the content, and everybody's very much worked collaboratively throughout this project. And the framework goes well beyond the traditional idea of dendrochronology as just dating. So it looks very much as the application of archaeological dating, but very much dating provenance of wood in historic buildings, as we heard in the previous talk. We talk a lot about woodland history, management, dendroclimatology, ecology, and new methods of using staple isotopes combined with dendro, with which you'll hear one project from Coralie later this afternoon as well. So just finally for me, I just want to thank all the institutions who've helped make this possible. Historic Environment Scotland are the main funders of the overall ScARF project in our remit to lead on aim 2 of Scotland's archaeology strategy. And I'd also like to thank Matt Ritchie, Lisa Brown and John Lawson as well for their help and guidance in some of the original meetings, and Forestry and Land Scotland, who have also provided additional funding specifically for this research framework, and also so we can publish an actual booklet. So we actually have, as well as being available online, you can actually come and get a booklet from our stand this afternoon, or download this as a PDF from our website as well. So I hope if you haven't already picked up a copy, I might see some of you later. So over to.
Well, hello everybody. As you've heard, the first update was in, this is the first update since 2012. And in the nearly 15 years since then, there's been a huge amount of work done. So the framework is a very timely update. I've listed the aims of the framework on the board to set a research agenda which will help clients, researchers, and, for want of a better word, heritage practitioners, that's all of you, and to help you prioritize projects and inform decision making. We also want it to inform policy, particularly to improve in the uptake of this very important analytical tool, which I'm afraid to say is not very well taken up in Scotland at the moment. And finally, to improve on both the preservation and the understanding of Scotland's woody heritage, both built and living. So in the framework, you'll find summaries of all of the dendrochronological evidence for Scotland. It's presented in separate sections on archaeological sites, historic buildings, and woodland history. And it's accompanied by detailed bar diagrams like the examples you can see here, as well as maps. Both of these are interactive and they show you all of the sites, which have been dated and where they are. So it's going to be an important sort of research resource going forward. The framework doesn't give any detail about methodology. We think that that's amply covered in other very accessible sources, but it does provide a guide to the basic principles underpinning the method, and also now to the multiple parameters that now can be measured in tree rings. You'll have heard in Jen's talk, and you're probably all aware, that the most commonly measured parameter is ring width, but other parameters are now being measured. And these in particular are stable isotopes and the carbon and oxygen in each ring width, and also ring density being measured by this approach called blue intensity. So there are separate sections in the framework which describe how these work and also about their application in Scotland. The information contained within each tree ring, be it its ring width, isotopes, or density, is also relevant to climatology and ecology. And there are also sections in the framework on both of these areas of research and their application in Scotland. These areas might not appear particularly relevant to this immediate audience, but obviously they all feed into our shared woodland history. Each researcher at the end of each section has been asked to identify what they consider to be key research recommendations. I have to say that it's a given that tree ring data in Scotland is still so patchy that every researcher has emphasised that we need to seize every opportunity to obtain and analyse material. But we've also tried to identify regions, periods, and building types which are poor in dendrochronological coverage, or where coverage is becoming significant enough that increased research is going to bring big dividends. So in this way, we're hoping to help archaeologists, all of you in the audience, building historians, etc., to identify priorities in their particular areas of research. So because it's me, one of the areas I've identified is Iron Age wetland settlement in southwest Scotland. This bar diagram summarizes it here. And we now have such a quantity of data in there that actually building on it, we would see really big dividends in terms of understanding Iron Age prehistory. I've also suggested the early historic period in northeast Scotland, building on the work of Gordon Noble and Michael Strategos at sites like Burghead here. Coralie has suggested looking nationally at pre-Reformation churches. This is Fowlis Easter just here, because this might yield some of our earliest historic timber structures. And she's also suggested a survey of vernacular, not a dendro survey of vernacular buildings, because it's such an understudied resource, and the work that she and Rob have done have yielded very, very interesting results. Apart from the more specific recommendations, and there are a lot more in the framework, which relate to just site and region, there are also some key strategic recommendations which have been shared by all of the researchers involved in putting together the framework. I'm not going to read them out. I've listed what I think are some of the key strategic ones, and basically they're relating to timber retention, national archiving of the data and the samples for future research, and a national record. But perhaps for me, the key recommendation is support and collaboration for research between these new types of analysis. And this is because these new methods offer us the ability to date non-oak species and also short ring sequences. And this is material that's very, very difficult to date. And unfortunately, it's all too frequently found in Scottish sites and buildings. And so sample it using dendroisotope and blue intensity offers a way forward. And I think that a combination, this collaboration is exemplified by the dating of Ancrum Bridge, where tree rings, wiggle match dating, and isotopes have been applied. I'm not going to say anything more because Coralie is going to tell you all about it later, and I'll finish on that note.